Welcome to The Know, I'm Miles Luna.
And I'm Gray Haddock.
Back when Microsoft ran into all kinds of messaging problems after the announcement of Xbox One, Sony took full advantage. Well, it seems turnabout's fair play, because now Sony's the one in the hot seat thanks to general confusion about the newly announced PlayStation 4 Pro.
Following some criticism about the PS4 Pro not offering native 4K resolution or frame rate improvements across the board, plus the lack of Ultra HD support, it looks like Sony's got a new problem on their hands. A translated interview that made it sound, emphasis on sound, like they could be charging gamers for patches to make old games Pro compatible.
Now, before you start hurling Molotov cocktails at Nathan Drake's house, this requires a little bit of context, because the story was kind of misleading in the first place, and has since been updated to state that no, Sony won't be doing that, according to an email sent by the company.
But the interview still deserves some attention because the only other interpretation still makes it sound like Sony's not creating the ideal environment for early adopters of the PS4 Pro and won't cover many of their existing titles.
Let's back up a step before we get to the interview. Starting when the Pro launches in November, all games from that point on will support the PS4 Pro either with 4K resolution, not necessarily native, and graphical improvements.
But older games aren't guaranteed to have any improvement. Yes, you will still be able to play previous PS4 games, chill out. However, you won't be able to see a jump in fidelity because the games were optimized for the current PS4 hardware. So at most, you'll see maybe a more stable frame rate.
If developers choose to, however, they can go back and patch old games to deliver that content with better resolution or improved graphical settings. So far, that list is fairly small but growing and includes Deus Ex: Mankind Divided, Killing Floor 2, Uncharted 4, Infamous, Shadow of Mordor, Black Ops 3, Paragon, The Last of Us, thank God, and oddly enough, The Witness.
Well, good. All right, I can sleep on that one. But what benefits or barriers could there be for developers to spend time updating older titles to have more PS4 Pro functionality? Well, that brings us to the interview that's causing all the ripples today.
The interview was conducted by Japanese publication Game Impress Watch with Sony Interactive Entertainment executive Masayasu Ito. I think that's how you pronounce that. Who indicated that these old 4K patches might be associated with a fee.
The translation of that interview, provided by Kotaku, has an interesting response from Ito when asked if the 4K HDR patches for existing titles will be free. Ito reportedly said, "It will be different for each title. I believe it will depend on the thinking of each licensee."
Game Impress Watch followed by asking, quote, "What you're saying is that there will be titles that have a fee for the patch and patches for the titles that are free," end quote, to which Ito replied in the affirmative.
Yeah, so now it's being reported in a number of places that Sony is considering charging gamers for the patches to update their old games. It didn't help that the original headline indicated as much, but fortunately that has since been updated along with a statement from Sony which says they will not be charging gamers.
So the actual interpretation of the interview, and always the more likely one based on the context, is that what Ito is actually talking about here are fees that would be paid by the developers.
Okay, so, typically, developers are charged by Microsoft and Sony whenever they want to issue patches for their games. And that might sound a little ridiculous on the surface, but most of that has to do with the testing that the patches put through on each platform.
Yeah, look, video games are hard, okay? Stop thinking that it's just easy. Now, we're honestly not sure what these fees look like for the current generation, just that they exist. Last generation, Microsoft got a lot of heat for charging for patches, to the point where they ultimately canceled the fees altogether because Sony was able to keep games working better. At one point, Double Fine's Tim Schafer indicated it cost as much as $40,000 to put up a patch on console.
However, it seems like the fees are back on the menu in the current generation, at least as far as Sony is concerned. According to the policies, they actually waive the patch fee for indie developers, which implies that there is a fee for everyone else. In general, though, the first one is free for everybody, just like good drugs.
So, what the PlayStation executive could be speaking to here is the cost associated with patching a game at all, and that if developers wanted to update their PS4 games for the PS4 Pro, standard patch fee would apply.
Another, however, even that option isn't very consumer friendly for all the reasons we outlined earlier. It's already going to cost developers precious resources to spend time updating the game as is. If Sony's considering putting a fee on those PS4 patches, then what incentive is there for any developer to go back and support old games?
Yeah, which totally sucks for early adopters of the PS4 Pro, because it means less of their old games would take full advantage of the console. If Sony really wanted to make sure developers participated, they'd waive all 4K and HDR patch fees. it would be a win-win for everybody.
So, either way you break it down, this policy would not be a positive one for gamers. One of them more obviously bad than the other, for sure, but both still bad.
When you think about it, it sort of says something about the way gamers perceive the industry, that we can imagine a world where a 4K patch could actually be passed off as a microtransaction. Buy the improved graphics add-on for $399, get your 60 frames per second upgrade for $999.
It also says something about how Sony is currently handling all the talking points around the PS4 Pro. When people are confused, they'll almost believe anything, and Microsoft ran into similar issues with the Xbox Scorpio after E3, especially when it came to whether or not there would be exclusives for the Scorpio. And it wasn't until recently that they clarified by saying yes, but only for VR titles.
It's not that these games all suck at PR, it's that they're trying to introduce something inherently confusing into an area of gaming where things have always been relatively simple. For the most part, consoles have made their bread and butter on being plug and play. It was one advantage, along with price, that console gaming has held over PC.
But that may not be the case anymore. If gamers are not sure about how their old games are going to work, what screens they need to get the most out of their purchase, different graphical modes that place emphasis on fidelity over resolution, it's already clear that these are things that both Sony and Microsoft are going to need to address, especially now that they're trying to rewrite the way consoles work.
So what do you guys think of the report that Sony's going to charge somebody for a PS4 Pro patch? Let us know in the comments.
For future updates on the PS4 Pro news, like this video, subscribe to the know.
I'm just gonna go play Nintendo.
On my mobile phone. 4K.
You good? You did? Sony executives like, no. Force choking you from across the world. You will not dishonor.